So welcome to Power to Speak, the podcast, with my guest today, Christophe Stourton. And Christophe, welcome. You are the Chief of Briefs and a Deadlineologist.
Thank you very much. That's a first to be introduced as such. Marvelous.
Yeah, well then, please explain.
Well, Chief of Briefs, really because that's integral to the program that I run, which is called Deadlineology. And as you know, I've tried to turn people into deadlineologists. So to get things done by a deadline, because that's at the root of what deadlineology is all about.
Yeah. And I know that because we have worked together, and you have very deftly made me write a business plan and actually focus on what it is that I want my business to be, which has been amazing. But when I looked into your LinkedIn profile and you know, sort of in research, because obviously I'm good at that's what I do as a podcaster. I do my research. And you've got written down here, which I love, is to make sure that people have a clear vision of what kind of company they want to be and the value it offers. So you give clients like myself the confidence to market their product, to defend it and sell it. And I know that from my experience, because the confidence I now have in Power to Speak means that I am confident in defending it. So where does that come from? What it's not something you would see written down to be able to defend your brand?
Well, I think it sort of implies that in some way, shape, or form, creative people are under attack. They're not really, but I think that they're very undervalued, and that tends to bleed through into the creative mindset a bit. But once you develop a confidence, as you so kindly have said it, in what value you can bring to the people that you serve, then if someone says, well, can you do this for a couple of £100? Or by the way, I've got some more work coming up later on this year, which you can have a go at. The answer is no. What I'm delivering to you is incredibly valuable, and these are the reasons why. This is my value proposition. And either you need it, you want it, or you don't. So you get into that whole situation where creative agencies, smaller agencies in particular, of which the majority of agencies are small, have to learn to say no. But it's very difficult to do that, because there's always a bit of a carrot there and all that kind of stuff. But I believe that if you can defend the value that you offer and present it and express it with confidence, then people will change their mind and go, well, actually, no, of course I was trying it on because I want to save my budget for the office day out in the summer. But of course, we should reward you beautifully for coming up with every little helps,
Yeah.
How far has that gone? So yeah, that's the reason. That's why I mean defend, is because you can square your shoulders and say, look, no, actually, you may think that I do fluffy creative stuff, but actually, what I do is going to be very valuable for you in the future.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what you've made me see about my business, because we do have, us creatives. Not that there are creatives and non-creatives, because we are all creative. But those of us that are actually working in the creative industries or the arts, as the background that I have, is you are always seem to be seen as fluffy, as an added extra, as a luxury almost. And it was when I came into networking and started running my own business that I got that impression from the businesses around me that kind of weren't sure where to put me, which is why I think I gravitated towards you and what you do, because that whole thing of being a creative, but knowing that there is a deadline and a brief to work to. That's at my core. I am creative and I love to do the creative stuff. But if there's a brief and if there's a deadline, I'm not going to miss that. Otherwise, so.
Well, we're all programmed to that, aren't we?
Yeah.
I mean, as creative people, and you particularly, you've trod the boards in the theatre, both in front and behind the stage, and that's a hell of a deadline. And I think that maybe actors are seen as being lovies and fluffies and all that kind of stuff. And we were chatting earlier about you playing pool until it's time to get on stage, but it's quite a serious business standing up in front of people, and the way that's driven, or the motivation, is that there is a time at which you have to perform.
Yeah.
And it's a great motivator. It's a fantastic motivator, having a deadline.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody who's involved in that kind of project and delivery for clients who give them a deadline when there's a launch. I mean, I used to work in events, and we used to launch products on stage, and there was an audience of 500 people and or 1,000 people or whatever at the NEC, and if you're not ready, then there's a whole bunch of people there expecting something and waiting for it. So you've got to be ready, and it's a great skill to go from zero to delivery, and meet the deadline, and I think that's at the root of what we were working together as well on, was that you can apply that incredible skill to building a business, and that's more familiar to the creative mind than it is to anybody else. And so why not use it? It's a skill that we all have already.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was it that has made you kind of niche in that way, to work with creatives in this way?
I suppose because I was one of those creatives with a business. I mean, I'm sure my colleagues will argue that I wasn't the least bit creative, but we were in the creative industries, and I worked in the creative industries all my life. When I left school, I went and worked for a photography studio that also had a little side doing events, and I used to drive a van up and down the country doing little events for the Ford Motor Company. And I've kind of experienced and been through the journey of working for a large creative agency in the 80s, and then starting my own and building that to a kind of mid-size agency. And I suppose I've been through all of the trauma of running a business, and quite a sizable one with lots of people, and all that comes with that, and also experiencing this kind of I think we call it imposter syndrome now, but it's a feeling that of uncertainty, because what you're promising to clients is an idea, and they have to put their faith, they have to invest in the fact that you can actually deliver that as an idea. So I've been through all of that revenue roller coaster, as I call it. I've been through that worry of having a business and making the payroll at the end of the month and all that kind of stuff. And I felt that with that experience and my training as a coach, I could contribute quite a lot to other creative people who want to have that security in their business, that surety of building something that is going to last and going to be there next week, and could fight their corner with other agencies and with clients and the world in general.
Yeah. So do you think that it's a question that I ask all of my guests, and I suppose this is a bit early on in the conversation, but what is your definition of creativity? What do you see as creative?
Well, I think that's part of the problem, is that nobody knows, really, do they? I mean, it's kind of, everyone has their own view. So for me, it's the ability to take a brief. So I want to brand my company as for instance. Can you do it for me? And then obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff that they want to say through that, but that's zero of anything. There's nothing tangible there. And then somebody will listen to that, and they'll read the brief, and they'll come up with something that is extraordinary. And that, to me, is creative. It's not something that maybe you or I'm not a designer. I couldn't come up with it. Not in a million years, but some people see that, and it's a kind of genius. I think I saw it a little bit. We dabbled in film production as well for the cinema, and it was just an amazing experience watching. Well, first of all, 90 pages of script you can raise 100 million quid on. You have to have a bit of a background to get that kind of money, obviously, but that's quite an investment. But watching the different disciplines on a film set come together and be directed to create a scene in a particular memory in a sports hall in Warrington, creating the interior of somebody's house it's an incredible thing. It's a kind of it's a magic. It's a genius to be able to create that kind of stuff, and you see it repeated whether you're a painter, you're an actor, you're a designer, you're a conference organizer, or an event planner, or whatever. There's a bit of magic going on there if the real creative stuff is there, and so I suppose that's what I think of creativity. But it doesn't necessarily. I mean, obviously, there are lots of people who are creative in business as well.
I think you've hit a nail on the head there for me, or maybe it's a light bulb moment. It's because it is that people trusting, and I think that maybe this is where the fluffy stuff comes from. Because at the beginning, if somebody asked you to create something, there isn't anything tangible. That it is an idea that you're selling in the beginning. When you step forward and say, "Look, this is what I can offer you," there's nothing that the customer, the client, can really get hold of. They have to trust that you are going to, you will produce what you've said you will, and whether that's on stage, in a film, a brand, a graphic, whatever that is, a script. You start with nothing, and somebody else has to trust in your creative mind to actually come up with that product. So it's not like you're going out with a widget and saying, "Here's my widget, buy it." You're saying, "I have nothing apart from what's in here."
It's interesting. I think that's the reason why in the creative industries, in general, we rely on past work to try and sell the promise of the future work. So that we worked very hard on this is to actually to go beyond that and define that promise more carefully. Not, I've done that for somebody else, so I can do it for you. More, here's what I can do for you, and by the way, I've done that several times with somebody else. Yeah. That's a much, much more positive way of presenting yourself, and I suppose your track record underpins your promise. But being able to describe your promise in enough detail for people to understand it and form an expectation based on what you said rather than what they anticipate is, I think, a much more persuasive way and a much easier thing to sell. Let's face it. If you've got a thing, you can say, "Here, this is my thing," like the widget you described. If you don't have a thing, you've just got to, "Here's what I've done."
Yeah, then here's one I made earlier.
Very difficult to defend,
Yeah. And that's why the confidence in your brand and your story and what you can offer is so important, because it's very difficult when like with what I do is I give you the promise that if you work with me, I will make you excited about sharing your business idea. But until you get in that room with me, until we come out the other end of that session or whatever it is that we're doing, you don't know that's what I'm promising you. But to have the confidence to say, "Yes, I can, because I've done it with this person, and look at this." As I say, it's finding something tangible. It's that thing of you're only as good as your last film, or you're only as good as what you've done before. So why then did you go down the business route, the business coaching route, having sort of come from events organizing?
Well, I guess it was a business. We were We were kind of communications insultants, if you like. We're often referred to as being desperately rude, but I mean, you know, we had a way of saying how things were. And it was a business. I mean, you know, we weren't in it. We had a lot of fun. We traveled around the world. We held events. You know, we had Nelson Mandela coming to our events. We had, you know, I mean, really interesting people that we bumped into in very interesting corners of the world. But nevertheless, we did it so that we got paid at the end of the day. And actually, just thinking back to what you said just a moment ago, the other thing about this promise that you make is that it's often a subjective thing in people's minds. So whether you are making a film and selling tickets, you know, people do or don't like it. There's a risk there that if they don't, then they're going to tell other people, and no one's going to go. And the same thing with what you do. You know, I'm going to make you excited about sharing your business ideas, and you work as hard as you can with somebody, and they're just never going to be excited about anything. That's not your fault necessarily. So there is that kind of uncertainty about what you deliver and whether people are going to come back and say, well, actually, I didn't really like that. And how would you know? So so long as you can put your foot down and say, well, no, this is what I am going to deliver, and you can show that that's worked, then you're fine. Yeah. Now I've forgotten what the original question was, John. So you have to come back.
Well, I think we started with why business coaching from doing events. But what events were they? Was there a business? If you know.
Yeah, these are corporate events. These were, you know, we didn't do. We occasionally did a little bit of fee paying stuff, but mostly it was us being paid by large corporation to do product launch or senior management conference or you know, incentive events for, you know, the best 150,000 salespeople in American Express in Asia or something. You know, so that was the nature of the business. Quite a lot of it was to do with changing corporate culture, values, new bright ideas in the boardroom brought alive on stage and communicated live to an audience. And we also had a video production company which also produced the film, a couple of films that we were involved with, and at a certain stage a logistics company to do the badges, posters, stickers, and T-shirts. So a little kind of group. So
the merch.
Yeah, but I mean, so business, and I always felt when I was running, I mean, it's really hard. Stop me when I'm being boring. Really hard to gauge the success of a corporate event. So there are a few people who've come up with good measurement systems, but when I was started, you know, it was like, shall we hand out a feedback form, which nobody filled in. You know, you've got this thing, what was the first presentation? How was the chairman's presentation? Good, bad, or terrible? You know, I mean, who's going to put terrible and then sign their name at the bottom? No one's going to. So it's really hard to gauge the value of what you had delivered. And quite often in that scenario, it was a feeling, or the client went, yeah, that was really brilliant, by the way, thanks very much, and send me your invoice. And I think that made me quite defensive. Having said I defend what I do, but made me quite defensive about you know, being outgoing about what we did and the success that we had. We couldn't put our finger on it, but once you can put your finger on it, then you can put your finger on it for other people, and you can express it to other people. So, so it's that on the one hand, that hard to define creative bit when you know you've done a great job, and the business of charging for that and realizing the value that you've delivered. Because I think if I was to, you know, one of the really essential things, important things for me in my work now, is that I can help creative people understand that value, that future value that they deliver, and charge appropriately and get rewarded. Charging is only part of the story, but get rewarded for that work, so that when they deliver something, a client doesn't sort of take it and go, yeah, thanks very much, it's not very good, but here you go, here's, I suppose we'll pay. No, they want to take it, you want to be able to say, no, this is now all over your brand new product.
Yeah.
What was the value of that? That's a huge value. It's made everyone really proud to be a part of this business that you've started, or it really speaks to the audience that you're looking at. Or this corporate video has got, yes, it's got 6 million views, but more than that, it's promoted exactly what you wanted it to promote. And so the comeback from that has a long tail. It's not just they enjoyed the video there, or they enjoyed the event, but because they heard what the chairman's new idea was, and they all bought into it because he delivered it in a way and in an environment that was fantastic, they're all going to do it later on, and the success of the business carries on. And it's really hard to point to that, but it is it's valuable. And I think that a lot of creative people underestimate that, and certainly a lot of clients underestimate what it. Maybe they do that on purpose, but maybe it's just an ignorance of the process.
No, well, I think the whole value proposition is very valuable. Absolutely. And I think it is a problem that lots of small businesses have. And I think sometimes it's why small businesses don't get bigger, is because they underestimate their own value. And they think, I'm absolutely guilty of it myself. You kind of put a price per hour on your head, and that's how you walk into a room. And somehow, you need to realize the value of what you're offering, and that value to the other person.
Well, how else are you going to charge beyond the limits of your own time?
Mm.
And if you're selling yourself by the hour, there's not much room for growth, because there are only 24 hours in the day, and you can't work all of them, and it's just you. So how the conundrum and it's certainly part of what I do, is to look at how you can extend your genius beyond the limits of your own time. There's also a limit. You can charge more and more and more because you're really, 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 really good, but eventually you run out of runway that way as well. You certainly run out of time runway. So how else do you do that? And I think that there is a genuine desire for creative people to do that for two reasons. Firstly, so that they can expand who they serve. And secondly, so that they can create some lasting value in their business. Because once you've created an entity and an enterprise, if you nurture it and make it substantial enough, I steer clear of the word growth, but you make it substantial enough, it then can be handed on. It can be moved to somebody else, either sold, given, deputized. You can deputize your involvement in it to someone else and still remain. So it becomes a thing that has some value. Normally, I think the creative mindset is, look, all the ideas come from me. So when I stop, that's it. Sayonara.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like that, because you just work hard to create a really successful business, and then you decide one day you want to go on holiday, and suddenly what you're saying is that it doesn't exist without you. And that's different to a kind of building like a retail business or a product driven business, where there's a stock and there are people with a sales process and all that kind of stuff. That's sellable. For how much depends on your skill in building it, but it's different with a creative business, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How could a creative person find that value in themselves? How would you advise a creative to kind of put a value on what it is that they're delivering?
Well, I think that. Thank you for that question. That gives me a chance to really be boring. But I think that it's about having a rounded approach to the way that you conduct, or the way that you charge for what you do. It's simple. And that means that you've got to have a bit of a story. You've got to have a way of being able to say to people, look, I am this creative person, but I'm not just going to go away and do something creative. What I am going to do is I am going to to do this thing that aligns with my why, the reason why I get up in the morning. You've also, so you need to back up what you do with the story of why you're doing it. Simon Sinek and all that sort of stuff. I think you also you need to know who you're telling that story to. You need definitely to know the kind of the building blocks of what your business is going to do for other people. So in my case, it was make a video, do a conference, do some communications consultancy, teach you how to speak, whatever. And then you need to package them up, because if you don't package them up, then you're going to be doing a lot of pitching, because people are going to ask you to pitch for something because you haven't explained what it is, what the package is. So you're going to get that situation where people go, oh, so what do you do? And you go, blah, blah, blah. And they go, and how much does that cost? Well, if you're making a 3-minute video, that could cost £750,000 or it could cost 250 quid. So it's a bit of a non-question. But if you say, look, I can make you a 3-minute talking head video for your website. Oh, how much does that cost? Well, you can come up with a price for it.
It baffles me, all that kind of, or is it? It's kind of an awkwardness of trying to put that to value. And I'm literally talking from personal experience of, as you know, from putting a value on what that is. So is it? If you look at it in a way that, sorry, my cat is. I might have to. I'm being a bit distracted by the cat.
Okay.
So apologies for that.
It was lucky for me, because a black cat had crossed my path and all that sort of stuff.
So yes, I think you absolutely did describe that whole kind of thing around the value proposition and how you can value what it is that you do rather than just putting a price on yourself per hour. But it is still something that I have trouble with, and I just wonder, can you gauge what it is that you do and what you should charge by looking at other people in your sphere, in what you're doing?
Yeah, I think inevitably you don't want to price yourself out of the market, so to speak. But you do want to have a fair reward for what you are delivering. And I think, and you've heard me say this before, that it requires looking at the future value that you have delivered. So as opposed to saying, well, I deliver value, be curious about what the future value is that you deliver. So if I was being briefed for a senior management conference at which a new corporate strategy was being announced, then instead of going, well, yeah, we can do this really nice stuff and it'll look brilliant and everyone will be able to hear and see, and there were flashing lights, and then we'll bring on this and then we'll have a guest speaker who's absolutely fantastic. And at the end of it, when all of that's finished, what is it that is valuable about that experience for the ongoing life of that business that is commissioning that event from me? And, taking what you to do, Jackie, what does the power to speak give people once you have delivered that for them? Not accepting that they do quite a lot of work in that as well, but what is that worth to them? And you I know have a kind of power to talk to investors. If you're working with someone who's trying to raise money for a business and they manage to achieve that because of the way that they the power with which they spoke to those investors and the creativity with which they did, then that's worth a lot of money to them. So why shouldn't you charge something that was worth a lot of money for them to have that? And the confidence bit is that you can persuade them that if they have that thing that you deliver, they can get that value. And if they do, I've got a client who says, I like clients who do what I tell them. And I couldn't agree more, because a lot of clients don't bother to do what you tell them. And so it doesn't work. And then they blame you for it. But actually, it's, but if they do, then they get something that they can take forward that is going to be, in some instances, completely life-changing. I'm sure you have seen that with your work. You've seen people transform from meek and mild, or I don't want to say anything, into this kind of raging Steve Ballmers on stage who are going boosters to say what they need to say.
Yeah. I don't want to get them overexcited. I mean, just to get out there and deliver their message. But no, that is incredibly valuable to anybody that's sort of in my position, just to hear that, I think. So thank you for that.
No.
In terms of creativity, though, do you think creativity is important in any business, or just in creative business?
I think that what it is absolutely essential for businesses to be able to express themselves. Creativity is absolutely essential. There are so many different businesses in this world who are doing similar sorts of stuff. How else are they going to differentiate themselves other than with a bit of creativity? But also, and now you can see how we've seen poet laureates on the news writing poems about this awful situation that's going on in Ukraine, and they're writing poems about it. Why? Because it really affects people. It moves people. And that's creativity. That creativity works across the board. We can't do without it. However dry, I worked with some large accounting firms, and that can be quite dry. And they needed our kind of spark to ignite some of the ideas which were brilliant in their own business, because they weren't able to communicate them. So it's an essential part of business, as it is an essential part of our lives, creativity, and it should, and it's worth an awful lot to businesses to have that input.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to people about their creativity, and it's amazing how many people say I am not creative, and then go on to do something very creative, that they don't consider is creative. Whereas I believe that it's innate in all of us. I think we're kind of born that way. And, I think there's a lot of creativity in problem solving and risk taking and all of those things that are involved in a business. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And when people go to creative companies, I mean, businesses go to, which is my particular area, but businesses go to creative businesses to solve a problem. They need to sell more product. So what do? They go to a marketing company and say, look, we need to sell more of this, and can you come up with a campaign to sell more? And that marketing business will use its creative mind to make the best of it. And sure, they can probably shift some more product with a few clicks and all that kind of clever stuff that goes on the interweb. But I reckon the bit on the top that really makes it fly is the creative bit. That's the bit that people get excited about, and that emotional engagement that makes them click through and put their credit card number.
Yeah.
So,
No, and I think that's right. I think it is that emotional, that emotional storytelling, the emotion that is in creativity, that we all kind of get excited about when we hear a poem, or when we hear some music, when we see a painting. But a lot of people take that as the only way you can be creative. They look at that person writing that and painting that and playing that instrument, and they think, well, they're creative, I'm not, because I can't do that. So I think there's a lot in the way that we kind of go through school, and the way we are kind of trundled along our lives, listening to adults around us telling us what we can and what we can't do, what we should do, is that we all kind of have this creativity in us, but don't feel like we can express it in our work.
And as a result, it's not valued for what it really is. And that's a huge problem, I think. I mean, I've spent a bit of time reading. Peter Bazalgette did a report on the creative industries, and this is about 3 or 4 years ago, I suppose, maybe even longer now, actually. But there is it's a huge industry. over 100 billion in this country in the creative industries, and we export a massive amount. So 40% of that, 40 billion odd, goes abroad. A lot of it is film and television stuff, but it's a very broad remit. So there's a lot that goes into that gross value added of 100 billion. But there is try raising money for your creative idea from a bank. It just doesn't compute because you're not talking to people who have the discipline to create something. They don't try it necessarily. And you're lucky if you're sitting in front of a bank manager who is mad on model trains, because they know what it is to create. And so that they'll have some connection with you wanting to borrow some hard cash for something that is essentially an intangible idea and is never going to get any more tangible than that, by the way. It's just a constant intangible. So you've got this kind of strange situation where there's an enormous amount of wealth within the creative industries, and it's all an intangible asset, or most of it is an intangible asset. Once you've made a film, I guess you can sell it because it's there. But initially, it's and I think that causes government a certain amount of anxiety. So they're desperately trying to get micro businesses, which is 95% of the creative industry, is less than 10 people. Is a micro business, to grow up into slightly larger and more substantial businesses, so that they become a bit more bankable. And if you're the chancellor, I suppose that means that you can rely on the tax income if creative businesses are a bit more robust. And that is also partly what I'm about. I think we do creativity in this country like nobody else. I just, certainly in business terms, but also in cultural terms as well. And that's worth building up into something, and it's worth giving us a national creative confidence, if you like, so that we can go out anywhere in the world and sell what we do, because we do it better than anyone else.
Yeah, but again, it comes back to that risk taking and trusting in that intangible idea and putting that investment into it. It's that's why I think there's a lot more people that the crowdfunding will take, to crowdfund for a film, to crowdfund for any creative project seems a lot easier with angels and investors, rather than turning up at a bank. You're more likely to get investment, aren't you, from outsiders?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It's really interesting what you say there, because having tried to raise a bit of money on some film ideas, and anybody who's prepared to entertain giving us any money to make a film wanted our shirts and most of the skin off our backs. And why? Because it's quite risky, and I think that's part of this commercial confidence that I talk about, which is de-risking in the minds of the people that you're making a promise to, who are going to pay you lots of money for that promise. It's de-risking that quite significantly, so that they find it easy to buy, and easier to buy from you than from somebody else if you're in the competitive nature. And that's one of the great kind of, I suppose, you talk about risk in terms of people taking risk, and I talk about probably more presenting yourself in a way that gives people confidence, because they're both sides of the same coin, I know, but that's the positive way of looking at it, as opposed to give me a try. Don't give me a try. This is what I can deliver.
Absolutely. And I have to say that is exactly what you've given me, is that commercial confidence to say, this is me. And it comes back to the beginning of being able to defend what it is that I do, and walk into a room and say, look, this is what I do. This is valuable. Take me on. Because if you walk in and you don't have that confidence, it's very, very difficult to defend and sell exactly what you have to sell.
Yeah, because other people come into the room and they go, hey, by the way, I can give you all of this, and it sounds great. And they may not be able to. It's a sort of component thing, but quite often the client will go, well, I'll go with them.
Yeah.
Because they seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah. And it's made me think really that actually creative people know in their own heads what they have to offer, that it's valuable. But we're not salespeople, we're not trained in that sales way. But a lot of what I do is around people, giving people permission to be themselves, to show up with their own personality and tell the truth of who they are, with humility, curiosity, and creativity. It's just kind of show up in that room as yourself, tell the truth, and that's where the confidence comes from. That's if you don't have that confidence in yourself or what it is that you are capable of doing, then it's very difficult to convince anybody else that that's what you're capable of.
I think it's hard to be humbled in that case as well. You look just a bit kind of unsure. But if everyone talks about the strength in vulnerability, and that's fine to show vulnerability, but underneath that there has to be a rock solid confidence.
Absolutely.
In your authentic self, that you're being yourself and that you're doing your thing, because otherwise it just feels a bit kind of fake.
Yeah.
It's an overconfidence, I think, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's not a proper. It's just a bit one-dimensional.
Yeah. You kind of have to it's like taking the audience with you as an actor when you're on stage. Whatever it is that you're doing, you need to be able to take that audience with you, and you can only do that if you're drawing people to you because of who you are and that confidence you have in yourself. And that's not an arrogance. That's a humility. That's saying, look, this is me. This is what I offer, and this is what you're going to get.
And I suppose there's a having trod the boards a little bit myself regarding there's a kind of if you have that knowledge that that you can make an audience feel a certain way, then it's okay to say, look, hi guys, I'm a bit nervous.
Yeah.
Because everyone else will understand that you're nervous. I mean, it is a nerve-wracking thing, but you're doing the opposite of being arrogant. You're saying, look, I'm a little bit nervous, but I know I can come through with you. So give me a chance, and off we go. Yeah. And then you can do your thing, and everyone will go, well, that's what you promised us. So that's the reason why I'm here.
Well, it's absolutely. I would love to ask you what you wanted to be when you grew up. I mean, having listened to you, trod the boards, you've made films, you've come to this point. What was the 9-year-old Christophe wanting to do when he grew up?
Well, apart from the odd, desperate to be Sean Connery moments, I wanted to be an architect. And I have never designed anything in my life, so but that was kind of on my on my list.
And what happened there?
I'm not quite sure what happened really. I got lost in the things. Actually, well, now we built. Yes, I spent quite a lot of time remodeling the places where we have lived.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and I enjoy that kind of three-dimensional world that we live in. Architecture is an interesting thing for me, particularly contemporary architecture. I love contemporary stuff.
So it's come out in different ways. It wasn't not a career move, but
yeah, I would never be. I'm not strong enough to be an actor. I mean, you've got to be able to be prepared to be rejected all the time, and I was never having any of that.
Yeah, no, that's hard. That is hard.
Really hard. And actually, maybe that's a certain lack of confidence. Maybe that's why I understand confidence and what it takes, as well as I think I do.
Yeah. So you spent some of your youth and your growing up childhood in Africa. Tell us.
Yeah, my dad.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was tremendous. It was great fun. My dad was an expat, and his company paid for me to go to school in the UK. And then I'd fly out for holidays, mostly to Ghana in West Africa. But we traveled around a lot. My parents were great. They were very adventurous. They took us on, places that, to meet the Wa Nab of Wa. Have a look on the map. It's in the middle of nowhere. I've never been anywhere that's quite so off the beach. Well, I've been in the Sahara briefly and the Namib and places like, because I love deserts as well. But yeah, Africa was a glorious place for me growing up, and I didn't have to worry too much about anything when I was over there. And we did some really fun stuff.
Yeah, so I hear you came face to face with an elephant.
Yeah, I should have. I mean, West Africa's wildlife has sort of all been eaten, I think. There was very little, certainly where we were, to go to East Africa to experience that. So when we moved to Zimbabwe, just after the war there, we went to see lots and lots of wildlife. But my parents took us on a trip, on a canoeing trip on Lake Kariba, which lots of people will know, I'm sure. And we got off to stretch our legs on an island, and it was sort of shaped like an hourglass. So it had a sort of constricted bit in the middle. And we walked around it. And when we came back to try and get back to our boats, there was an elephant in the constricting bit. So we couldn't get past it to where we wanted to go. And the guide who was taking us, the ranger who was taking us, he said, look, we'll just back off slightly. Elephant will flap its ears, look really angry. And it was enormous, bull elephant, this thing. And it'll flap its ears, and then it's going to do a mock charge. And you just walk back a bit, and then it'll stop, and then we'll see what happens after that. So Julie, this is exactly what happened. And there were, apart from us as a family, there were two other people from Liverpool who'd come on this canoeing trip. And they immediately turned around when this elephant came towards us. They turned around, ran straight into the water and started swimming out. We all turned around and went, come back, there's crocodiles underneath you, which we could see. And whereupon they said, it's like a cartoon, they turned around and kind of swam right back. But yeah, that was all part of the fun of the fair.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just part of everyday life, I would imagine, out there.
Yeah, and we were talking about power cuts the other day, having a power cut for 4 days here, and we spent a lot of time, certainly in West Africa, with no power. So all the lights went out, and we had to entertain ourselves in different ways, which were, didn't involve electricity quite a lot of the time, which was fun. It was good. It was a tremendous upbringing. I had lots of friends over there, and it was pretty chaotic and tremendous. I loved it.
Yeah. Is there anything from your childhood that you kind of bring into your work now? Is there anything you sort of learned from either living in Africa or those sort of experiences that you had that you have sort of shaped you as an adult, do you think?
I'm sure there are. I'm not sure how conscious I am of them, but there is a kind of sense of fun in whatever I do. I mean, I think that if you're doing something and is completely humorless and you're doing some stuff that's really serious business coaching, then it's I think humor gives us a lot of encouragement in all sorts of ways, and maybe certainly in Ghana, where I lived in Accra for a long time, or where my family were, everybody laughed. It was just a constant laugh, and it was this. It's what you just smile and laugh a lot. And I think that was just. I think certainly that's carried itself over. And when you're facing disaster and you can just laugh at yourself, then it's bad. So you put your finger on this with talking about humility. It humbles you when you go, hands up. Let's just have fun. Let's just have a laugh. That and rhythm. I grew up
rhythm.
Yeah, because I've got African music or certainly West African music in my head quite a lot, and I listen to a bit of it now, even now. And it's there's lots of it around now. You can hear lots of it in lots of different places. But if a queue formed in Accra, it was normally there was some dancing that went with it, because what else are you going to do? You're just going to stand there. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's what we should do. That I'm going to start that next time I'm in a queue. I'm just going to start bobbing.
Well,
see if anybody joins in.
stick your headphones in. Nowadays, nobody thinks it's strange at all.
No, they don't. No, they walk along talking to themselves, don't they, with their headphones in? And yeah, let's talk a little bit about deadlineology.
Yes, that's easy for you to say, Jackie.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? It's because there's no E in Deadlineology. Let me find.
There is no E. I debated whether or not to put one in there or not, but that's a much shorter word, so that's what it is.
Let's put so Deadlineology. So explain a little bit about what you do with Deadlineology.
Well, Deadlineology came about. I rang, in fact, a chap called Roger Lindley, who's a great script writer, has worked in the creative industry similarly for an awfully long time, very long in these. And I said, help. When I go on to LinkedIn, there are 650,000 business coaches in the UK alone, and how on earth are we going to differentiate ourselves from that? And he, bless him, said, you need anology. So this is what I came up with in response to that, really on the basis that I was looking for something that immediately anybody who was involved in the creative industries would recognize as common to them. And deadlines, our lives are run by deadlines. It's either curtain up, exhibitions open, or a product launch, whatever it happens to be. When you're working for clients, deadlines are what you run your life by. They give order and structure to the creative process. You can sit there and cartwheel ideas till 2025, I'm sure, and they'll all be absolutely brilliant. But without a deadline, it's pretty meaningless because everything's moved on. So at the root of what we all do as creatives is work to a deadline. Even the most fey of artists will have to get something ready for their exhibition by a certain time. So I thought that would reflect the kinds of people that I like to serve, and feel that I can give some benefit to. And that got me kind of thinking about, well, what's the process that leads up to that? And of course, it's in the shape of a brief, which has a budget and a deadline attached to it, and you respond to that brief, and we all do it. We get something in from a client, they brief us, we start from scratch, create something marvelous, and then deliver it by a deadline. And that, to me, is an incredible process. And so Deadlineology is all about applying that process to the business of building a business.
Yeah. Really, and that's exactly what you did with me in the process that we went through, because you got me right at the beginning of us working together to think about a presentation that I would then make, or a pitch even of my business to anybody, and whoever wanted to listen. There was nobody in mind at that point. But actually, the way it was structured, there was that deadline at the end. So to explain that process a little bit, why that process that we worked through?
Well, it's a combination probably of that that knowledge of how to fulfill and deliver a project, married with a bit of kind of business theory, I suppose, which I got through my coaching training and also of running my own business. But what if you don't know where you're going, you've got no way of telling whether you're getting there or not. So that, to me, is the brief. As Roger said to me once, he said, if a client came to you and said, just go away and do something creative, your first reaction would go, yeah, fantastic, I do loads. And then you go, but what shall I do? Because if you haven't got a brief, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So in the same way, if you're building a business, and it's very, very helpful to have your own brief for what you're going to achieve, your own vision for what you're going to create. You also need to know what kind of commitment is required of you to actually make that happen. So hence you have to give it a budget. And you also you can leave it open-ended if you like, but you don't want to be 95 and still trying to build a thing that you didn't know what you were building in the first place. You want to get to a stage where you say, well, I've done that. I can do something with it. I can make a choice as to what happens. So that is really the process, the same process that I go through with, we went through together, and I go through with clients, is of seeing what's they want in their lives, recognizing that their business is the thing that's going to deliver that for them. So their business, they'd like to be a certain shape and to deliver for them a certain set of metrics of emotional delivery, of financial and functional goals that they have, and then to work through a response for that. And the purpose of pitching it, as you did, was because you want to persuade people that it's worth investing in your business, and by doing that, convincing yourself that it's worth investing in your business, because you're inevitably going to be the biggest investor in your business. You're going to put the most time in, most money in, and all that kind of stuff. And if you can do that, then I think you can persuade some clients to make that investment in you, and what you promised to do for them.
Yeah,
I
that
describes what I put you through, or we worked together on.
What you put me through was hell. No, it was great, because you did make me realize that actually I am the biggest investor, and actually the person I was pitching to was me. And then that was the whole point. But I liked the way as well that we worked in slides. And I think that's, that appealed to my creative brain, was actually that I was visualizing what each step was, because each step was a slide in a presentation. So I assume that's deliberate.
That's certainly deliberate, because I think you can agonize over. I mean, I always say that being concise is, for me, one of those really, really important things to be, because none of us have time for long-winded waffle stuff, and here I am waffling on still. And slides is what I kind of grew up with as a support to what people were saying, and it's very easy to write your entire script on a slide, but actually, if you can boil it down to its essence, it's a really good way of communicating and using for you yourself to communicate, to express what it is that you want to say about your business. So yeah, that is deliberate. And it's, when you look at investor pitches, people like sort of Airbnb and Uber and things, that they raise gazillions on the strength of sort of kind of 12 slides, and you should be able to do that with your business too. How many did you have? I think we got down to 12 with you, didn't we?
Yeah, more or less. I was working to 12. Yeah, I think there might have been a couple of extras in there, but no, I think we kind of stuck to that. I mean, and the other thing as well was that you never once mentioned the word business plan. And actually, once I'd kind of transferred all of our notes onto a Word document, basically what I have is a business plan, which I never thought I could do. So thank you for that.
You are the ideal client, because it's all the right thing, Becky. But yeah, no, that is. Yes, I don't trailer it, because I think that a business plan is very off-putting to an awful lot of people. Everyone knows they've got to have one, but they don't really do it, and then they put that off, and it doesn't really have any shape. And so it's a kind of sneaky way of creating one, but one that actually means something, rather than just sort of is loads of paper that sits in a drawer. And I hope that's what has happened.
Absolutely. So how do you work with people, and how can people come and find you? Who is your ideal client, and how can they find you?
So I target most of my effort on creative micro businesses. So could be one person to up to 10 people, maybe a bit bigger, but that's what a micro business is defined as. Anybody who works on projects, basically, because I know that they'll be experiencing the kind of roller coaster ride of feast and famine when you're working really hard on one project. Who's out there getting the other ones for you? Creative, because I think that gives me the most fulfillment, is when I'm working with someone who really, really nails the value that they can deliver. and it doesn't matter where they are in the world. Preferably speak English, because I'm pretty ropey at any other language really, apart from French. Yeah, that's really my ideal.
Excellent. Oh, that's great. So I'm going to show your LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's the best way to get in touch with me, really. Actually, LinkedIn now. Website less and less, but LinkedIn more and more.
Yeah. But obviously, people, if the website is quite detailed, the different coaching packages that you do. So do head to the website if you can.
Head to the website and have a look. And if you don't find what you want there, just give me a call.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being on Power to Speak the podcast, Christophe. It's been fabulous to have you.
I have no idea what I've waffled on about, but it's been tremendous fun. Tremendous fun.
Excellent. Well, there was so much there to talk about. I mean, we could have talked for another hour, but I'm aware that we've done over an hour already. So it's been fabulous. A great conversation. So I'm going to say goodbye, Christophe, and thank you for being a guest on Power to Speak the podcast.
Thank you very much for the invitation.